Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is coming at the end of February next year. They say quite proudly in the trailer, oddly, that it's coming on 2 discs. I don't know if that's just for the retro factor or some weird badge of honor, some weird boast. What we do know about it is that it's coming after an extremely meta ending to the first game. And I, for one, am really surprised, Alex, that we're even seeing it within a decade of part 1.
Well, let's not beat around the bush, right? And let's just say up front. So I've played the game, but let's just say up front, we won't shy away from talking about the meta angle and how Final Fantasy VII Remake ended. I don't think that would spoil the game for you if you haven't played the game yet and you're on the fence and you're looking at Rebirth and thinking, am I going to go back and play Remake? I don't think it would hurt the experience if you heard the stuff that probably is going to come up in this conversation. But let's just say, spoiler warning for Final Fantasy VII Remake. And unless you're extremely sensitive, no spoilers for Rebirth. I'm only going to be talking about what Square is happy to show. And I got to play probably about an hour of the game in total.
Okay.
And that was 2 segments. The first segment was a chapter that, if you've played the original Final Fantasy VII, this will mean something to you. But basically, the first section was part of the Nibelheim flashback that's been rejigged a little bit. So that is a very important flashback that takes place 7 years before the main events of Final Fantasy VII, and it's this is the stage when Sephiroth, the big bad guy, is a good guy, and all the rest. And then the second segment is sort of the approach to Junon, where Junon is the first big place you go to after the party leaves Midgar, and obviously Final Fantasy VII Remake ends with the party leaving Midgar. Depending on how you look at the original Final Fantasy VII, Midgar finishes maybe halfway to 2/3 through the first disc of the game, probably halfway through the first disc of the game. But Final Fantasy VII is really weird. Like, if when they first said they were doing a remake, people were like, it'll be 3 parts and it'll be 1 part per disc. But people forget that, like, disc 3 of Final Fantasy VII is like 15 minutes long in the sense that really all that's on disc 3 is a bunch of side quests that could also be done on disc 2 and the final dungeon. And almost the reason they needed that 3rd disc was because they had a 15-minute ending CG that probably took up over 50% of that first disc's data. That 3rd disc data. But basically, so Midgar was about a third, but it's about halfway through the first disc of the original game. And but actually, if you were to look at the script, Midgar contains about half of all the compulsory text in the whole game.
Right. Okay.
So Midgar's extremely dense compared to the rest of the game. So so Midgar was the first Final Fantasy VII Remake game. Played 2 parts of this. Part of it was the flashback. The other part was Junon. In the original game, you go to a little town called Calm. And in Calm, the flashback happens. Cloud explains his past. So the flashback will probably form some of the start of the game, if not all of it. And then they sort of jumped us into another save, so to speak, that is the approach to Junon. So after Calm, you go through some events. You go through a farm and a dungeon, and then you have the approach to Junon, which is a big city. That's the bit we played. We sort of played the approach to Junon, and fans of Final Fantasy VII will remember there's like a whole sequence with a dolphin and a girl who's friends with a dolphin, and a boss that's related to that on the underside of Junon. That's sort of where this demo concludes, is with that boss.
Okay.
It's a public demo, so by the time this goes out, Tokyo Game Show will be open, and the exact demo that I played will be on the floor of the show. And I dare say, because they also have an English language version, which is what I played, I wouldn't be surprised if that then ends up showing up at PAX or EGX or any other, events over the coming months. Yeah,
other events are available.
So people will be able to, I presume, play this. I don't think it'll be released, but people will be able to play this. And so it was really interesting. And like you said, you said you're amazed, right, that we're seeing it so soon. I think that's the theme of this hands-on, this is the power of Square Enix not having to throw everything out, not having to throw the baby out with the bathwater, in making a new game. Because it is very, 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 very much an iterative sequel to Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Yeah.
But the impression I get is that sort of gives them the ability to be wider, deeper, bolder than they would be if they were building this from scratch. It's almost like some people criticized the original FF7 remake because of, so a bit linear in spots, right? And the open worldy bits were basically a lot of blobs connected by quite narrow corridors.
Just little Yakuza segments connecting things together. Yeah.
But the Junon area is that we played is a big, wide, open area where you're riding a chocobo. You can call the chocobo at any time by pressing a button. You can move around. There's sort of hunts. So there were 4 hunts in the area. I only found 3 of them, and I was speaking to someone at Square, and they said, I'm not actually sure if all 4 are in the build, because there was an area of the Junon area that was blocked off for us in the demo. But there were definitely 3 hunts available in the area, and I did all 3 of them. And the hunts sort of had cute sub goals, so it's like each one had 3 different objectives. So one was like defeat within the time limit, one was perhaps cause a certain state on the enemy, give them a certain status effect, something like that. So you'd have 3 goals like that, and if you could get all 3, you'd get extra rewards. There's hints at like a crafting system where you're picking up materials and you can use those to craft items, and these things weren't in the original Final Fantasy VII Remake. I mean, and to give perspective, that Junon area is, I would say, more wide open than any area of Final Fantasy 16, except for possibly the very last main area you travel through, which is a great area. But the thing is, because of the nature of Final Fantasy 16 story, that area is all barren and buggered anyway, so there's nothing there. So it's just a big area that's full of enemies that you ride a chocobo through, but there's nothing there. Whereas here, there's like a little chocobo farm you can go to, and you can buy armor for your chocobos. You can buy little boots to go on the talons and headpieces and stuff like that. But it is very, very, very much. I was quite surprised. Like, it's funny. This is my most anticipated game of 2024. Yeah, and I think it will be no matter what else gets announced, unless like something impossible happens. Like Microsoft goes, well, Perfect Dark's out next year, which it won't be. I'm not saying they won't be. That's years off. But this is my most anticipated game of next year. And it's funny, I came out of the hands-on sort of like really, really pleased, but at the same time, in a weird way, ever so slightly underwhelmed, because it is just very much an iterative build on what came before in every sense. So the combat was very familiar. Yeah. You see a lot of the same abilities on the 4 characters who were playable in the first game. Obviously, there's going to be more stuff that unlocks as you go. Both these elements were early game. There is new stuff, so it's like there's the synergy attacks. Yeah. So wasn't that
introduced as DLC in Integrate?
Sort of, yes. So in Integrate, you play as Yuffie, and she's with Sonon, who is a new character. Yeah. And basically, in Integrate, they had sort of team up attacks, and this basically is an evolution on that. It works a bit differently to how it worked in Integrate, but the end result is pretty much the same, which is that 2 characters team up and have a cool cinematic looking attack. The way it works is obviously you have the ATB bar that fills up, and then that lets you use special moves. And it appears you do have to. This wasn't in the build, but reading some interviews and stuff that were done, it seems like there's going to be a skill tree to unlock those abilities. But it seems like there will be abilities for every combination. So say your party is Cloud, Aerith, and Red 13. There will be synergy moves for Cloud and Aerith, Cloud and Red, but also for Aerith and Red. And any other combination you can think of. So you swap Red out for Barrett, and there would be combos for Barrett and Cloud and Barrett and Aerith, and so on and so forth. So that's going to be a lot of combinations, because the playable party members in this game that we know of is Cloud, Tifa, Barrett, and Red. They are all playable in the build that I played. Yeah. Additionally, in the flashback, you do get to play as Sephiroth, but I don't think that will be a long-term thing. Well, it's a funny one, because in the original game, he's in your party with you in that flashback. Yeah. But he's AI controlled and he's super powerful. So you get into battle and he just one-shots everything before Cloud can touch them. In this, they do, when you get to the boss, give you direct control. You can switch to him like you can any other party member of Sephiroth. So that's cool. But I don't think he's going to be a party member. And then, of course, in the trailer that they showed the other week, there was we'll see how it's pronounced. We're waiting for footage where someone says the name out loud. Is it going to be Ketsi? Is it going to be Kate Seif? Because like the Irish pronunciation is that first one, but who knows? We'll see. But they're playable as well, and I dare say, based on everything we've seen, probably Zach's playable. So you're looking at, what is that, 4, 5, 6, 7 potential playable characters, and then they've there was an interview on the PlayStation blog where they said there are some characters that will appear but won't be playable in the same way Red wasn't playable in the first game. So I'm betting they might hold Sid and Vincent back for the third game. But either way, there's a lot there, and anyway, to come back to it, the way this synergy stuff works is you've got the ATB bars, and once a character has spent, at least the synergy skills that I saw, you have to spend 2 bars. So if you spend 2 bars with Cloud, he's ready for synergy. And then if you spend 2 bars with Aerith, at that point you can go into the menu and do Cloud and Aerith synergy attack.
Okay.
So it's basically if you're using your skills often, and it's like a incentive to use your skills often, you'll be able to let loose with these combo attacks, which is pretty cool. And there's some other nice stuff. Cloud's got some cool new abilities that I saw. There's some interesting new materia where it's like, so in the original game, materia is strictly elemental, so it's like lightning materia, fire materia. I saw some combo materia, so like one materia that gave you both fire and lightning magic.
Okay.
There was some more materia that sort of impacts the AI of party members that you're not in direct control of. Some materia that lets them use their unique character abilities from the AI, whereas before, if you wanted to use Barrett's like big gun fire off, which was really good at reducing, giving enemy loads of stagger, you would have to switch to him, manually trigger that, and then switch back to Cloud or whoever you were controlling at the time. So it seems like they've looked at all these systems and thought about ways they can streamline them, ways they can give players more control. But the interesting thing is, it is totally just building on that system. There is, in this hands-on, there's nothing radical, which is quite different for Final Fantasy.
But yeah, as you say, that's the reason they've been able to get this out within, the same console generation, or
well,
or
not
like,
technically.
Well, not technically, yeah, but like, it's how they were able to get it out within living memory of the first one, which is amazing. I'm genuinely surprised that we are seeing it, but I guess that's the trade-off, right? But if people are, I don't think people are going to be upset that it's more the same, because people love that first remake. So
it's a really good game, and what they are doing is sort of addressing all the issues people took. So people didn't like the open worldy bits because they weren't very open.
Yeah,
they've got open worldy bits now that are actually quite open feeling, and it'll be really cute. And like stuff that I didn't get to play, but you see in the trailers where you see them in the buggy, which was a car that you got very early on in Final Fantasy VII, and the buggy is driving through areas that look large. You see Cloud using a chocobo to climb a mountain. Again, something you could do in the original, but that was obviously that chibi world map. Here you're going to be doing it in these more open zones. So they're directly addressing, and it seems like it wasn't in the menus, the weapon upgrade stuff, but just the way the menus are structured, I get the impression maybe weapon upgrading, which sort of sucked in the original, is probably going to be retooled. When I say original, I mean in the first remake game, sorry. So they are sort of addressing all this stuff. And, I think they've also got the story stuff where they're building up intrigue. They clearly got comfortable now with the concept of changing things. So, a really small, really good example that is something that only like the Final Fantasy VII nerds would remember. Basically, there was a boss in Final Fantasy VII called the Materia Keeper.
Yeah, I hated the Materia Keeper. Yeah,
so that was fought on Mount Nibble, and that was obviously fought with the main party. That wasn't in the flashback. In the remake, that boss you fight going up Mount Nibble with Sephiroth. So it's like they've taken a boss and they've moved it, presumably because they're moving story pieces around.
I see, okay.
And presumably because they wanted to make the flashback have a bit more to it. Needed some more fights, I guess, right? So they moved a boss from the present to the flashback, and I mean, we'll see. Maybe they'll make you fight it twice.
Yeah. I mean,
that could be a thing.
Because you're playing Sephiroth when you first fight the Materia Keeper. Then does that mean you can one shot the Materia Keeper and you think, oh Christ, that's done with?
No, and that's actually, when it comes to the flashback, that's actually something I was ever so slightly disappointed with. And again, they were keen to emphasize, they were like, this is a build that we've built for public, for shows. So there's things in this build that we have changed from the main game. But something I was quite disappointed in is, in the flashback sequence, at least in this build, Cloud's like level 36 and Sephiroth is like level 40. So Sephiroth is only a tiny bit more powerful than Cloud. At least in the gameplay sense. In the story sense, the way the cutscenes are configured and stuff, you can see that they're trying to push that Sephiroth is a badass dude. But I sort of hope when you go into the flashback in the full game, Cloud's like level 12. And really, in order to defeat that boss, you have to switch to Sephiroth. But I think that very well could be something they change for a show build, because they don't want people to get confused and get one-shotted as Cloud, because that'd be miserable. But yeah, I mean, it's really, really interesting, and I think that first trailer they put out, I don't think was a very good trailer. But this second trailer, where you sort of see glimpses of so much stuff, and you see how the Gold Saucer has like 8 different mini games and stuff like that, you can see how they are building something that is huge, and something that has a scale and a breadth of activities that hasn't been seen in Final Fantasy since the PS1 days. And the reason they're able to do that is because they're not starting from scratch. You know, they sort of said building 4 party members plus 1 guest party member for Final Fantasy VII Remake was all they had time to do. But that means now you've got those 4, and all you've got to do is maybe add new skills and new progression to them, and you move on, right? But you can then add more, and that means in total you have 6 party members, or however many it ends up being. And that's the value, really. That's what I see, is I just see they had a really good game that was a really good foundation, and now they're just going wider, they're going bolder, they're doing more. I think they're going to be quite brave with the story, for better or for worse. And it's sort of everything. Like I say, it's weird because it's everything that I wanted, and yet I left the hands-on slightly underwhelmed, in the sense that I was like, well, yep, that is exactly what I thought it was going to be. I think maybe they've kept their cards quite close to their chest, so maybe had they had a little bit more story meat for us to get into on the hands-on, I would feel a bit differently. All there really was in the hands-on that was interesting story-wise is that Materia Keeper change. That's interesting. And they've sort of the events with the dolphin and Priscilla and the monster in Lower Junon has been at least partially retold to be part of how the party meets Yuffie. Whereas in the original game, she was optional and you just bump into her in a random encounter. So they've put her on the critical path. So if people are wondering where she comes into the picture, she comes into the picture during that storyline. At least partially. I don't know if that's where she'll be recruited, but that's where people will meet her for the first time. So, yeah, it's a funny one, because it's a game I feel like I should have more to say about, but it's just like, did you enjoy that game? Did you enjoy that take on the active time battle combat? Did you enjoy the way they represented those characters in a modern game? If the answer to all of those things is yes, it just seems like this is going to be more, and probably a fair bit better than the original.
Well, that's exactly what you want. You know, like the first part had to... I guess the first part had to really nail the fundamentals, right? Which it did. And now they can, having nailed those, they can go on and expand it and bring in those other elements, make it a bit more. There's some more branching paths this time, right? As well as the fact that it's a bit more open. I'm sure I've read that they're talking about how like the player has a little bit more freedom in terms of how the story goes and things like that.
Yeah, well, so obviously in the hands-on, it was pretty linear in the sense that the story objective was go to Junon, but it was like, if you want to tool around in this area for an hour and a half, there's enough little bits and pieces of side content to do that. Or you could just run literally from where you started to Junon and be at the boss in 10 minutes. Would less, be at the boss in 5 minutes. But obviously the game expects you to go off the path, and we'll see how much of that there is. I think the interesting thing is, and have to, if for the ultimate explanation of this, shout out to Tim Rogers' review of Final Fantasy VII Remake on his channel Action Button. Now that is like a 4-hour review of this game, I think it is, but it is excellent, and he is just a hideously talented man. But he sort of breaks down the structure of Final Fantasy VII Remake, and he did the crazy thing of like playing it 3-4 times in a row, and all the footage, putting it all in Premiere and like color coding it based on what sort of content it was. And he sort of broke the game up into different sections, and so you can see that Rebirth is going to have the same sort of structure. So it's like one of the sections, he called them Prestige Tours, which I think is a really good name for them. And that was chapters like the reactor bombing mission, where it is linear. You're going, it's structured like a Call of Duty mission. You're going from room to room to room, and there's combat encounters, and there's bosses, and there's cutscenes. And then there's the open world noodling around stuff. And, in Final Fantasy VII Remake, that was the stuff in the slums, which was varied from sort of crap to okay. Never really amazing. The Prestige Tour stuff appears to be unchanged. It's like the flashback is one of those Prestige Tour missions again. It is absolutely in that wheelhouse, and I fully expect the Prestige Tour thing to sort of stick around. It's like, what's the thing before the Junon area? It's I had a little peek in the menus, and it gives you the gives you like the recap of what happened before the mission that the demo puts you on. It says, they've after making their way through the Mithril mines or whatever, and just like the original, the Mithril mines was a dungeon and you fight the Turks in there and stuff like that. And I'm pretty sure we've seen in the first trailer a clip of a fight in there as well. I bet the Mithril mines are like those Mako reactor missions, like a Prestige Tour, a linear A to B to C dungeon with cutscenes and story scenes, and then it spits you out into this Junon area, and that functionally is one of these open world areas. And I think that structure will probably be the same in Rebirth. So the question is, how much latitude do they give you within those open world areas to maybe go to a different town first, stuff like that? Something they have said out loud is you will visit most of the locations from this section of Final Fantasy VII Original in Rebirth, but you might not visit them in the same order as you did in Final Fantasy VII, which the question is that because they're giving you more freedom, or is that because they've changed twisting the order of the story and stuff?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's going to be really interesting to find out. And one last thing I wanted to ask you was, I think where the first remake, where part one got us to in the story was, I think a lot of people felt like that they were left sort of hanging at the point where it started getting really interesting, right? Where do you think part two is going to get you to in terms of the story of the original game?
So they have said out loud, it's even on the PlayStation Store page of the game, which I think, one, is quite shocking, but two, really smart move by them. Set the expectations. They did this with the first game as well, where they said it covers up until you leave Midgar. And they have said the story of this game will conclude at the Forgotten Capital, which is the place where the thing happens. Or will it happen? I think that will be the thing.
We don't know, right? We
we
literally don't know.
That will be the thing about how this game ends. It will be, does it happen? How does it happen? Or what happens in its place? I'm in the camp where I don't think it will happen. I think something else will happen. But yeah, so it's going to go up to there. They've also said that Wutai, so that's Yuffie's home country. So as soon as you pretty much have access to something that can get over water, so I guess that'd be the tiny Bronco, the biplane that crashes and basically becomes a boat. As soon as you, in the original game, pretty much as soon as you can get the tiny Bronco, if you know what you're doing, you can weave your way over to Wutai and do that Wutai side quest, or you can leave it for later. And they have said out loud, they were like, Wutai will be in the third game. So they've said, so they're making some choices here. But they've said it will go up to the Forgotten Capital, which means, in the broadest sense, it means you're going to get Junon, you're going to get Costa del Sol, you're going to get the Gold Saucer, you're going to get Coral and Nibelheim, you're going to get the Temple of the Ancients, and then you'll get the Forgotten Capital, and then some bits and pieces in between. Oh, and Cosmo Canyon, of course, Cosmo Canyon. So there's quite a lot. There's quite a lot there. There's quite a lot of locations. And it'll be interesting to see. And obviously, all that is just what the original Final Fantasy VII story does. You've got this weird stuff going on with Zack, where we haven't seen any clips of Zack playable, but we've seen enough scenes of him in trailers and stuff now, and he's on the box. He's clearly going to make up a significant portion of this game.
Yeah.
Who knows? Is he in an alternate universe? What is going on there? But the question is also, what do his sections of the game look like? I think probably at least a good chunk of his section of the game is probably going to take place back in Midgar, which will let them reuse a bunch of stuff from the first game, but we'll see. But so that's an unknown too. But yeah, I mean, in terms of, they have said the story will conclude at the Forgotten Capital for this game.
And that's really exciting.
Which again, that comes back to what I was saying about the disc structure of Final Fantasy VII. The Forgotten Capital is the end of disc 1.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that people forget is that disc 2 and disc 3 probably have less content in total, those two discs together, than just the first disc does.
Yeah. So, yeah. It doesn't have that really kind of, as you say, the really dense kind of hub city area. All right, so I mean that all sounds incredible. Are we taking bets on whether or not Sephiroth will kill Cloud instead, or?
I think that's the most likely thing, because if
they
they
have a part 3
are
without Cloud.
well, so this is the thing, right? Because you've got the whole thing of, if you look at the trailers, you've got, now we're getting into like hardcore speculation, but whatever, buckle up. I think I've talked before when we've talked about this game about bloody Yesterday's Enterprise or Father's Day, and I think it's basically going to be that story. But obviously, the thing they did at the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake, inside the Singularity, which was like in between worlds or whatever, created a timeline. One, they broke free of Fate in their own timeline. Okay, done. And there's been so many lines of dialogue about Fate or in the trailers already. That's something they're clearly on. So that means that things now no longer have to follow the exact same path as the original Final Fantasy VII, which allows them to diverge and change the order of things and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Whereas in Final Fantasy VII Remake, every time they tried to diverge, the weird ghosts appeared and tried to force things to go the correct way. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, in that first trailer, you have a Singularity, whatever universe they were in, it destroyed a huge chunk of Midgar.
Yeah.
And in the first trailer, the first scene they have is the destroyed chunk of Midgar, and you see the bodies of Tifa, Barrett, Aerith, and Red, all dead.
Yeah.
You don't see Cloud, notably, which I think is really important. You also have Zack now survives his death, which should have happened as it happens at the end of Crisis Core. And then in these trailers, you've got Zack returning to Midgar. It's clearly the same ruined Midgar where we see the dead bodies, but he's got Cloud with him, because obviously in the normal timeline, he gets killed, Cloud goes back to Midgar, Cloud is fucked up, Tifa finds him, nurses him back to health, and then Final Fantasy VII begins.
Yeah.
So it's sort of timey-wimey because the timelines don't add up, because there's a couple of months between where Zack survives and where the original game begins.
Yeah.
But it seems like, basically what I'm getting at is, it seems like Zack and Cloud are in an alternate universe. And that's interesting in itself. But then you've got the line of dialogue in the new trailer where Sephiroth says reunion. I think he calls it the merging of worlds.
Right.
And reunion previously in Final Fantasy VII was obviously anyone who had the Genova cells, which includes Cloud and Sephiroth and all the people that were experimented on, would all converge in one place, because Genova, crazy alien, and that was reunion was the act of Genova trying to bring the parts of her body back together in a weird alien way. And so if you were injected with her cells, it would take over your body and make you go to this location to reunite. So to say reunion is the merging of worlds, I'm then like, okay, so if you've got Zack in one universe, then you've got the main universe. The merging of worlds is the other Zack and Cloud coming over.
Right, okay.
And ending up in the Prime universe, in our universe. So that's my bet, is that you play a bit of Zack. Eventually, the way you play as Zack and Cloud 2, maybe, brings you over into the main universe, and then Zack will be instrumental in saving Aerith's life and stopping that from happening.
Yeah.
But somehow, as a consequence of all that, the Prime Cloud will die. That's my that's my expectation. And then the setup for Game 3 is like everything's ruined, the timeline is ruined, and that's where you go down your Yesterday's Enterprise. Zack and the other Cloud and Aerith all realise they have to die to restore normality.
I love it. You've just written the third game. There we go.
That's my prediction, because I don't know. It's like these guys. People think that these guys are gonna. They are revolutionaries and geniuses, but to be honest, the thing I'd say about if you actually look at Kingdom Hearts and you look at the other Final Fantasy VII games and you look at the other games that Najima and Nomura have written and stuff that Toyama's contributed to as well, because he's sort of co-director mostly on the story side.
Yeah.
Those guys love other media, they love tropes, and they love to paint within the lines of those tropes. And I think if they're going to do this time travel-y, wibbly-wobbly, multiversal story, I think they will be looking at Twin Peaks and other similar stuff. And so I think it will hit upon beats. So as someone who likes sci-fi, it's like the second I saw they were breaking the future, I was like, the conclusion at the end of this is not going to be we broke the future and created a better future. It's going to be we broke free of fate and made everything worse.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think is probably going to happen. But I cannot stress enough, because I know some people who know me know, sometimes he knows stuff about Square games. I know nothing about the story of this game. I have expressly asked people to not tell me anything, because I want to be surprised. Whereas I got to be honest, with Final Fantasy 16, I knew where a lot of that was going. But yeah, I've expressly asked to not be spoiled because I'm loving thinking about it and doing this speculation. But I genuinely believe that is where it's going to go. I hope it's something as crazy as that anyway. I want them to sort of embrace it. Yeah. Embrace the unknown. I mean, that was how the first game ended, right? Like, the last thing it did was it put text on the screen that said the unknown journey will continue. And that's the idea now, right? It's like, it is an unknown journey. Final Fantasy VII Remake wasn't a remake, it was a sequel. And now they can do what they want. And that's really exciting. And I think when you combine that with, like, the iterations on what was already a really good combat system, already, when I say iterations, even like character models, I don't think, even though that was a PS4 game and this is a PS5 game, I don't think the character models are that different. They've been touched up and improved, but they're not a huge leap, because they don't need to be, because they were so good to begin with.
Yeah.
They don't need it.
It was one of the best looking PS4 games, definitely.
Some of the I think the issue there was always the main character models on the PS4 version even were low-key PS5 character models. Yeah, but then they were often, for less important characters, they were often interacting with people who looked like they'd fallen out of a PS3 game. And so you had that mad mismatch. And I do think, from what I saw, that mismatch is still there a bit, but now it's like PS5 models interacting with mid-gen PS4 models, which at least is an improvement. the unimportant NPCs no longer look like they fell out of Final Fantasy XI. So that's... Yeah.
There we go. I think we'll just end it there. That's brilliant. Thanks, man.